And here comes the next chapter, sardines. It took longer to coax the raft back upstream. Leela steered them close to the bank, and they hauled their way along an overhanging branches when the pole wasn't long enough. The branches hung low, and all four were covered in ants and spider webs. By the time they reached their home stretch of river, with fresh scratches on their hands. "It was here," said Con. "I recognised the way those vines wrapped around that branch." The branch struck out conveniently over the river. It was perfectly placed to act as a mooring branch. It jutted out at an ideal angle right above the bank of the black Amazon soil. Fred stood wobbling hard on the raft. "Watch it," said Con. The branch was just over his head. It was covered in tendrils where it met the tree and shone green in the sunlight. He grabbed hold of it, tied a loop in the end of his liana rope and hung it over the branch. "That's perfect," said Leela. "Take a coat hook for our boat." "It is perfect." Fred stayed standing, looking up at the branch in his hand. He peered closer. "It's perfect because somebody made it perfect." There was a beat of silence. Then, "What do you mean?" asked Con. She spoke quietly. Fred didn't answer. He moved the branch to and fro under its covering of vines. It creaked back and forth under his hand. The vines wound like a rope around it in a figure of 8, repeated over and over. "It didn't grow here. It's been tied on." Max was staring open-mouthed. "Who did it?" "Did you?" "No, Maxie," said Leela quietly. "Not him. Somebody else." Fred looked behind him. A gust of wind caught a pile of fallen leaves and spun them across the forest floor. The back of his neck prickled. He reminded himself again that the trees did not keep secrets. They walked back to the clearing in single file. Fred came last. He turned to look backwards at every step. The rustling in the bushes seemed to follow them, but it was just the wind, he told himself. Wind is a trickster. It plays havoc with your courage. The fire still had hot embers at its heart, and Fred lay down on his stomach in the grass, and the earth blowing at it like bellows. His chin inches from the fire. His eyes were red and smoky by the time it was rekindled. But the roar of it sent a wave of relief through his chest. The fire was the closest thing they had to a weapon, and its warmth felt like safety. Leela was arranging their shoes, which had been soaked on the raft, in a circle around the ashes. "Can I see that thing that you found in the water?" she asked. Fred held it out. Most of the writing was covered in rust, but he could see, written on its base, the ingredients. "Look at the bottom," he said. "It says, canned in Plymouth." Leela looked blank. "Well, Plymouth is in England," said Fred, "down by the sea." "I don't know if you had fish in England," said Max. "Of course we have fish. What do you think we eat?" said Con. "Crumpets," said Max. "And cigars." "But if the tin comes from England," began Leela, "then it must have come with whoever made the camp," said Fred. "An explorer, maybe." "Who goes exploring with sardines?" asked Con. People used to come here People used to come out here with all sorts of things, pianos and china ornaments. Sardines seemed normal in comparison, said Fred. He felt a hot surge rising in his chest. If the person who made the camp had been English, he might have been one of the explorers from the newspapers Fred had read, one of the explorers who had never returned. Percy Fawcett, Simon Murphy, Christopher McLaren. "I had a book," said Fred, "about a man called Hiram Bingham. He was climbing and he came across a whole city built by the Incas. It wasn't exactly discovering, because some of the Peruvians knew about it, but nobody else did. Can you imagine that? It would be like suddenly finding the ruins of Birmingham in 1,000 years' time." Leela moved closer. Her eyes were set far apart in her face, eyes that could not look at many different things at once, but now they radiated curiosity. "I've heard about it. It's called Machu Picchu." "Yes, that was the name. Usually, though, men just go missing, like us," said Max. "Sort of," said Fred, "except usually it's because they're dead. which we're not. Yet, said Con, ominously. Fred ignored that. And there was this man called Percy Fawcett. He was looking for a ruined city. He called it the City of Zed. And then, not that long ago, it was 1925, I think, he just disappeared. And another man, Christopher McLaren, he went on an expedition to find out if Fawcett's dream was real. He was my favourite. He wrote letters about waking up to find maggots growing in the crook of his elbow. How lovely, said Con. Did the maggots get him? Nobody knows. He sent a telegram and then he just disappeared. Fred hesitated. I memorised it, actually. How does it go, said Leela. Fred cleared his throat. Just a line from the last outpost of civilization to advise you that I am about to go out for a communication. I am well and fit, and there is every hope of a successful issue to the expedition, risky as it is in some ways. Con raised an eyebrow. He sounds fun. Newspapers want people to sound like that, as if they have been wearing very clean shoes. But I know he wasn't like that. The other men said he was the maddest and the bravest of the mad, brave generation. Why did you memorise it, though? Fred blew on the fire again, so they wouldn't see his face reddening. I just like the idea that there are still things out there that we don't know. At school, it's the same thing every day. I like that it might be all right to believe in large, mad, wild things. The journey on the raft had taken up the whole morning, but still the afternoon stretched ahead of them, thick and green and vibrating with heat. We need more wood, said Fred. They would burn through what they had by the time the dark came. They needed so many things, he thought. Food, a plan, a map, a passing ship. But at least wood was something he knew where to find. His vision swam as he stood. He was growing weaker, and the blood in his veins felt thinner. At first, Fred went fast, his head down, marking the trees with an X scratched in the bark, watching his feet amongst the roots and the fallen branches. But soon he began to slow. There was so much to look at, so much was strange, so much was new and vast, and so very palpably alive. The trees let down their branches, laden with leaves, broad enough to sew into trousers. He passed a tree with a vast termite nest, as big as a bathtub growing around it. He gave that one a wide berth. The greenness, which had seemed such a forbidding wall of colour, was not, up close, green at all. Fred thought. It was 1,000 different colours, lime and emerald, and moss and jade, and deep dark, almost black green that made him think of sunken ships. Fred breathed in the smell. He'd been wrong to think it was thick. He thought it was actually detailed. It was a tapestry of air. The trees clustered more closely together the further he walked. The light grew dimmer, though he was sure it was still mid-afternoon. A deep green filtering down through a roof of leaves and vines. He heard something move in one of the green bushes that clustered around his feet. "Hello," he called. He stepped backwards. "Hi." As he called something sharp, scraped against his arm. He jumped and leapt away, swearing, and felt his mouth fill with a taste of fear, bile and tin. But it wasn't a snake or even a spider. Being stupid, muttered Fred. It was just a bush. Or perhaps it wasn't even a bush. He leant closer with a clump of spiky fruit. "A pineapple," he whispered aloud. Fred felt his fingertips prickle, shot through with a spark of discovery. This, he thought, must be what Columbus had felt like. He reached out to pull the fruit from its throne of leaves and then snatched his hand back, watching blood swell from the serrated gash in his thumb. "Ah!" he whispered. He braced himself, wrenched up 5 of the biggest pineapples and set off at a run. A slightly jolting run, checking every few trees for the X and doubling back 3 times. At last he burst through the trees at the edge of the clearing. He was met by a scream. "Get back!" Leela was standing in front of Max, one arm pushing him behind her, a stick pointing in the direction of Fred's throat. Con stood behind, her fists raised. "I brought some pineapples," panted Fred. Then slowly he took in the scene. He grinned. "Were you planning to kill me?" We thought you were a wild animal, Con said, flushing deep with red. Call out next time you come charging straight at us. Excuse me. It was Max who saw the pineapples in his arms. He gave a roar of joy that shook the fire, and as he sat down, his teeth bared ready, he held out both hands. Mine, 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 he said. Fred turned the pineapple in his hands, looking for a way in. Gingerly he bit into the side of the fruit. A spike got up his nose and another in his gum, but the juice was most spectacular. It was the best thing he'd ever tasted. It was sweet and warm, and it sparkled on his tongue. It's amazing, he said. It's like eating electricity. Con took a bite of hers. It's more like waging a war than it seems fair for desert, she said. Fred used his nails to scrape away the skin and dug out a handful of the flesh. He held it out to Max. Here, you'll like it. Leela was bent over her fruit, her plaits hanging over her lap. Now she looked up and grinned. Are you sure you wouldn't like a flint? She said. She'd cut into her pineapple one of the arrowhead flints and carved out, roughly, palm-sized chunks. She laid them out in a row. Oh, that might be an improvement, said Fred. Somehow he had pineapple juice in his ear. Con laughed. Leela hacked the 5th pineapple into quarters for breakfast, she said. She wrapped each piece into a large leaf and stacked them outside the den. Don't miss the next exciting episode.